What happens when the biggest kid show in the world gets bigger? That's the story of Sesame Street as we move through the 1970s. As discussed in earlier episodes, by 1975, Sesame merch was everywhere. More and more storybooks were released every day, alongside a monthly magazine full of art, stories, games, and crafts. The show itself became bigger too, and in the process shifted into something more recognizable to nostalgic millennials who think back on their childhood. During the show's second season, the monster at the end of this book was released, cementing Sesame's permanent place in children's literature. Season 3 brought new human characters, Maria and Luis, played by Sonia Manzano and Emilio Delgado respectively, as well as the gigantic Muppet Mr. Snuffleupagus. Season 4 introduced one of the show's most famous Muppet characters, the eccentric Count Von Count, alongside Biff the construction worker, frantic monster Frazzle, and Sam the robot. Likewise, that season also introduced classic animated segments that continued to air and be referenced well into the 2010s and 2020s, like The Alligator King, Ladybug's Picnic, and I Can Remember.
Now don't forget, a loaf of bread, a container of milk, and a stick of butter. If you can't remember, I'll write it down for you.
That's okay, Mommy. I won't forget. I'll remember.
So if Sesame Street is becoming more, that surely means more female Muppets, right? After all, half of all children are female, right? And representation matters, the reflection hypothesis, symbolic annihilation, all those other moderately extensive words I'm always using. The show is getting bigger, right? So more female Muppets, right? Well, sort of. I can't stress enough how much weight Prairie Dawn, and to a much lesser extent Betty Lou, are pulling at this point. As we discussed last week, Prairie was already making inroads into being the female Muppet of Sesame Street, even if her appearances were still nowhere near as frequent as, say, Grover's. By 1972, our petite pink pals were really the only members of the old guard of female characters still appearing in new material. Roosevelt Franklin's mother and Franny had been retired from speaking roles, consigned to the big puppet heap in the sky. And Granny Fanny would appear once in Season 4 before riding her unicycle into the sunset. So who replaced them? Well, if you look at 1973, when Season 4 ended and Season 5 began, somehow the answer is both many characters and absolutely no one. And that's what we're exploring today.
That's right, I know what I'm saying.
I'm Becca Petunia, and today we're going back to school as we talk Smart Tina, Suzetta Something, and the Twiddlebugs on today's episode of A Prairie Dawn Companion.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Starlight Hotel takes great pride in presenting the world's favorite 6-year-old entertainer, Miss Prairie Dawn.
Come on, girls, girls, girls. Let's go do girl stuff. Yeah, girl stuff.
Can you play a song with a beat?
So like I said, we're talking about a couple of minor characters today. Specifically, in order of introduction, Smart Tina, Suzetta Something, Tessie Twiddlebug, and Tina Twiddlebug. Before I bring in my guest to talk about clips, like I usually do, I want to address something that is very interesting about these characters. They were most often part of different ensembles than the main Muppets and Humans of Sesame Street. Smart Tina and Suzetta Something basically only appeared in the Roosevelt Franklin Elementary School sketches, which featured an entirely new cast of characters to accompany old favorite Roosevelt Franklin, now appearing at school rather than with his mother. other Tina, Tina Twiddlebug, and yeah, there's two Tinas introduced in what was basically a 1-year span, if that doesn't give you an idea about how unimportant these characters are. Well, the other Tina and her mom, Tessie, only appear alongside Dad Thomas Twiddlebug and brother Timmy Twiddlebug. This makes sense because the Twiddlebugs are an inch high and live in Ernie's window box, so they're not exactly going to show up to play hopscotch with Big Bird. When these characters can't form relationships with the main Sesame gang, it becomes extremely difficult for them to become main characters. They're separate, never able to be the focus of a storyline or bounce off of 90% of the characters we love. Tina and Suzetta can only interact with new characters and Roosevelt Franklin, always on the school set. Tina and Tessie are even worse, since while they appear alongside Ernie, they don't seem to realize that Ernie exists. Our friend is a godlike being to them, omnipotent and omnipresent, controlling the weather with his watering can.
There! Now all my plants are watered. Gee, I hope the Twiddlebugs didn't get wet.
Okay, sorry for getting all existential, but the point still stands. What chance did these newcomers ever stand at becoming main cast members when they're arguably as much of the cast as the Ladybugs Picnic 12? Which explains how my guest today told me that she wasn't aware of any of them. But that's great, a fresh perspective to talk about the next wave of female stars. Joining me from ToughPigs.com, writer and all-around great gal, Drake Lucas. Let's go chat with her over in the guest corner.
All right, it's showtime, people! Oh, welcome to our little play.
So, as I said, my guest today is Drake Lucas from ToughPigs.com. Drake, you're one of the newer writers with ToughPigs, although how long have you been with ToughPigs? Newer is only relative.
Ooh, I think, 2-3 years.
Yeah, it's not that new, but you might be a kind of new voice to some of our listeners because you've really only been on one Tough Pigs podcast before. So why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself and your history with the Muppets?
Sure, thanks, Becca. I'm happy to be here, and I just grew up loving the Muppets, and I did not realize there was this amazing fan community. So I came to it more recently, and I was so excited to find that there are other people out there who geek out. I just thought everybody was a Muppet fan in a nostalgic kind of way, but realized, no, you can be more than that. So that's why I've enjoyed being with Tough Pigs and meeting everyone in the community here.
Well, we're so glad to have you, and that's why I've been so excited to have you on the show, because you've been doing the recurring Muppet Gals Talking series for ToughPigs.com, where you've been interviewing some of the female performers with the Muppets about the work that they do. And that means that you're already thinking about how important, the role of these female characters and female performers performing these female characters can be.
Yeah, it seems like, from Craig Shuman's book really kind of underlined it for me that there were so many women involved in the Muppets that we don't hear about. And that's from performers to costume designers to puppet designers to writers to producers. I mean, they have all different roles in there. And yet I think, for most people, you're familiar with the big ones, the main guys that are doing the Muppets. And it's really great to be able to talk with the women who have been involved and really been so important, going all the way back to Jane Henson, in shaping the voice and the look of the Muppets, and really highlighting what they've been able to bring.
Yeah, and I really appreciate it. I always look forward to whenever you post one of those articles.
Oh, thanks, Becca. I enjoy doing them.
We're not going to really talk about many of those performers today. Well, sort of, but not fully, because as I told you, we're here to talk a little bit about some Tinas, as well as a Tessie and a Suzetta. Because as my audience knows, we are talking about the Roosevelt Franklin Elementary sketches today, and the Twiddlebugs sketches today. One appeared at the end of season 4, and one appeared at the start of season 5. That actually, before, and I should have said this earlier, but like, how about with Sesame Street in particular? I know you've been watching through a lot of old Sesame Street stuff with your daughter recently, but what's your history with this kind of universe in particular? Because I know you told me you weren't familiar with the Twiddlebugs, really, or Roosevelt Franklin's classmates. You weren't really familiar with them before this recording.
That's true. So, it's interesting. I do not remember watching Sesame Street as a kid. I know I must have because I know all of the characters. And I recognize them and I know the toys and, I knew songs. I definitely had albums, but I don't actually remember watching it. And I think there was, I must have watched it as a kid. There was a long gap where I did not watch it. My Muppet Family Christmas is where I saw all the Sesame Street characters. So when I really got interested in learning more about the Muppets as an adult, I started reading the background of Sesame Street, Street Gang, and the Jim Henson biography, watching documentaries, I Am Big Bird, that kind of thing. And so I know a lot of it from that angle. And then, of course, when I had a daughter, she's now 8, but I got more immersed in the Sesame Street world, but kind of as now with the way that in which you can watch it, it's from the beginning to the end. So the sketches she loved were Ernie and Bert and, Mr. Johnson and Grover. And then we would watch songs. And I loved watching the initial, the first series with her, but then we'd jump around and Twiddlebugs and Roosevelt Franklin just didn't show. I mean, I know of them, but I was not as familiar with them. And wow, what two different universes those characters reside in. I mean, Sesame Street contains multitudes because they are quite a different variety.
Yeah, the only real linking factor between these characters, besides the fact that 2 of them are named Tina, but the only real linking thing between these characters is that these characters really did, Tina, Suzetta, and the rest of the Roosevelt Franklin gang and the Twiddlebugs really lived in sort of their own spheres, where you didn't. There's a couple of exceptions that I'm sure folks who are listening are going to yell at me about on the Discord. I know the headball sketches exist. You don't have to tell me that. But with only a few exceptions, Smart Tina and Suzetta and Hardhead Henry Harris and Baby Breeze, they only really appeared in that Roosevelt Franklin Elementary sketch with Roosevelt Franklin. You wouldn't see them on a Guy Smiley game show or hanging out with Grover or, talking to Susan and Bob. There's a good reason for that we'll get into in a second, but folks listening might know. And the Twiddlebugs are the same. They interact with Ernie, but calling it interacting is kind of not really. They're not really interacting. They're reacting to Ernie, but they don't know what's going on. And you're not going to see them, with the core cast. So we have these kind of shingles of Sesame Street that we're seeing as the show expands. Now, Roosevelt Franklin, we talked about on episode 4 of this show. We talked a lot about Roosevelt Franklin because in that episode with my guest Christy O, we talked about Roosevelt Franklin's mother, who was his original sort of co-star. By 1973, season 4, Roosevelt Franklin's mother wasn't appearing anymore, and instead they paired Roosevelt Franklin with these new classmates on the segment Roosevelt Franklin Elementary. Roosevelt Franklin Elementary is an interesting segment because Roosevelt Franklin is definitely a child, but also seems to be teaching the class every time.
Where's Roosevelt Franklin?
Where's that Roosevelt?
You better get in here. I want to learn something today. Everybody stand up. We're all standing up. Everybody sit down. We're all sitting down.
It's also an interesting segment because, as I've alluded to, it introduces a bunch of new characters. And these new characters are Anything Muppets. We don't know who puppeteered these Anything Muppets because they are voiced by the Sesame Street human cast. So Smartina is voiced by Sonia Manzano, Maria, and Suzetta Something is voiced by Loretta Long, who was Susan. What's your take on these characters? Let's talk about, honestly, the segment as a whole. What's your take on this segment as a whole, Roosevelt Franklin Elementary?
Oh, it's so interesting. I mean, I really enjoyed it, actually. I think these characters, they have such interesting nuance to them, and they're a little bit different than what you see in some of the other sketches. But as you mentioned, it's supposed to be this elementary school. It had very Grease vibes to me. Like, it felt like some sort of like high school situation. Obviously, no teacher oversight. And I actually love the interaction between these characters. You can tell that teasing is a love language for them. They each seem pretty confident in their voices and wanting to put their voice forward, and yet in that kind of, again, high school way where you have that kind of a bit of you want to act cool, you want to be the cool kid, and yet they kind of police themselves. They're kind of like, give them a chance, let them talk. I do think that Smartina kind of has to prove herself. Obviously, she has lots to say and she wants to say it. And the other kids are like, here she goes again. Here comes Smartina. And yet she comes through, and she's got some interesting moments where she admits, I was wrong.
Yes, I guess I was wrong for once. For once?
She doesn't double down. She admits she was wrong. She comes through on the poem. So I felt like, she's kind of that know-it-all that I think we all had at some point in some of our classes. But they're not bad, and you don't hate them, but there's a lot of teasing that goes on.
Well, that's one thing that's super interesting about the sketches as a whole. And again, we'll get into more specifics about Smartina in a second, but one of the things that strikes me as so interesting watching this now is, like you said, how different it is than the rest of Sesame Street, because you said teasing is kind of their love language, and you get the sense that they're all friends, but also, I can't imagine the regular Sesame Street Muppets talking to each other the way that Roosevelt Franklin's classmates talk to each other.
No, it's a totally different vibe.
The Africa segment is super interesting because it is dealing with this really important issue that children and adults tend to let stereotypes from media sort of shape the way that they picture a region of the world. The idea that Roosevelt Franklin has to teach his friends, look, there are cities in Africa, guys. There are cities there is a huge deal. But in that one, it ends with hardhead Henry Harris saying that
she got feet like an African elephant.
And there is no apology to that. The characters just fight until the sketch ends. The characters just fight. And it's funny, but in some ways that was kind of the doom of Roosevelt Franklin and Roosevelt Franklin's Elementary. And I don't know if you know the backstory there, why you probably don't know Roosevelt Franklin and his classmates, but they didn't stick around. And I tried to do some research into why. There's a whole bunch of different reasons given, but basically it seems to be some discussion of Roosevelt Franklin and his classmates misusing AAVE, African American Vernacular English, in ways that some people felt were offensive. and also that Roosevelt Franklin's class was too rowdy and too raucous. And that is cited in the Sesame Street 40 Years book as a big reason why they couldn't last, this difference. But yeah, I really do like it in its own way. I can't speak to the AAVE component. I don't want to sound, again, like that's something that I would obviously defer to an expert in that field and someone I would love to talk to about this in the future. But as a segment that's fun to watch, I think it is. You started talking about Smart Tina. I don't want to do all the talking here, and I'm sorry, Drake, but you started talking about Smart Tina and how she has a lot to prove, it feels like.
Yeah. I mean, just in the way that she really wants to be seen as smart, I know that's her name. Like Smart Tina is like, know it all, say nothing, Tina. But, she obviously gets that the other kids tease her and she wants to project being smart and as smart as the thing that is going to bring her status in the classroom. Obviously she doesn't know everything. And that is part of the, I think, conversation with these jokes. But she also does, the joke about, I really liked the Africa lesson. I thought it was a really good way to present that. And the very end with the joke about the elephant feet, she doesn't just like shrink away then or something. She's like chasing that guy around and everyone's like, I don't want to hear what Tina has to say to him now. Like it's almost like provoking her because he knows she can take it in a way, because there is that conversation within the classroom and there isn't the sense that that she will be forever, like traumatized by this one line. I feel like there's been a back and forth between those two characters for a long time, and we're coming into that relationship. I'm not saying that's great to, humiliate a classmate in front of everyone and bring them along on this poem in which they're being called an African queen and then tell them they have elephant feet. But I did feel like it was part of a broader conversation between those two characters that we were coming into. And I did get that rizzing there is like, if they feel they can't tease you, that's a problem. Like you kind of maybe haven't found your place yet. And I think she, in a way, has found her place in the classroom, but is going to continually try to prove herself as this, the smartest one in the room.
We do see that with the teasing, that I feel like even in, and I didn't send you every single one of these Roosevelt Franklin Elementary sketches, because there's actually a bunch, but it feels like every character gets their turn being the butt of the joke, and every character gets their turn teasing the other characters.
Right. It's not continually picking on someone. There's not like someone who's the total loser of the classroom, and everybody's like, oh, let's just dump on whoever again.
Yeah, like so in the traffic one, which I think was the first one that I sent you, where Baby Breeze is like, Tina, you have to shut up.
Smart Tina, when it is your turn to teach the lesson, you teach your lesson. Right now, it is Baby Breeze's lesson. Now, you understand where I'm coming from?
But it's not. But then we see in the later one, in the Too Cool to Cry one, that like the other kids are making fun of Baby Breeze in that one, and Baby Breeze is sad about it.
He all right. The window was open and the air knocked him down.
No, that wasn't it. It was 5 million wild horses that ran all over him.
Oh, no, Martina, y'all were in here and you saw the rocket ship fly in through the window and knock him to the moon.
Wait.
And again, it is this weird, like, I like that you mentioned it as almost like a love language, because it feels familial in the sense that, like, it's not like, oh, we just always make fun of Baby Breeze. It's like, no, we're going to make fun of Baby Breeze and Baby Breeze is going to make fun of us. Yeah. I feel like there's more to say about Smart Tina than Suzetta something.
Agreed.
What's your read on Suzetta? Do you have a read on Suzetta?
Have much of a read on Suzetta, to be honest. I didn't quite get the, she had the poem about her checkers, learning checkers.
She sure did.
I did enjoy that classroom poetry slam. I feel like, I didn't feel as strongly about her. I also would say, though, that, Sonia really, I feel like, had a very strong voice for Smart Tina, and really, really, like, I felt like it helped define her and what they were trying to do. I maybe just didn't see enough of Suzetta to really form as much of an opinion on her.
Well, that's okay, because you saw basically every sketch where she has more than one line of dialogue. So okay. The answer is she just didn't do much. And, it is interesting that you point that out, because obviously I love Loretta Long a lot too. Mm-hmm. But yeah. I do feel like Sonia would do stronger character things on the show than Loretta Long. Like, Loretta Long was like always Susan, which is great because Susan is a lovely person, but like, there were like the Charlie Chaplin bits with Maria and stuff. And like, yeah, that's different because obviously in the Charlie Chaplin bits, she wasn't talking and Smart Tina never shuts up. But it is that sense of like, I get the sense that Sonia liked to make big character choices in a different way than Loretta did. And I'm kind of just, I'd need to speak to both of these people to be able to say that for certain, but it's just something that I think is maybe there if you think about the show as a whole.
Yeah, and I'd be curious to know, like, if they were, when they were, filming this, if they were all in a room just kind of trading this dialogue, and obviously they would have had some things scripted, but maybe there's a little bit of like how they played off each other more. That gets reflected in the puppetry. So I think it's a little hard to know how that was happening in that space. And maybe that is a space in which Sonia felt more comfortable kind of putting that voice forward, or maybe the character dictated it, depending on how they were created. So.
I truly wish we knew more of the behind the scenes stuff of these. And I think partly because these were kind of canned and wrapped up very quickly. Again, like I was saying, there was controversy. We don't have much. Like I said, we don't know who was the puppeteer of each individual character. I'm pretty sure it was... I'm pretty sure it would make sense if it was recorded first and then lip-synced by the puppeteers, kind of Sam and Friends style. That seems to be what would make the most sense. But I guess I don't even know that for a fact. One thing that's really interesting that I learned is we don't know who's voicing or puppeteering Hardhead Henry Harris.
Oh, we don't even know the voice, huh?
Nope.
Ah, I do. Nope. I kind of like that guy.
I kind of like Hardhead Henry Harris,
he's
too.
So, he's different. I like these lessons because they are, even in the traffic one, it's like, damn, the car knocks the guy right over while he's walking across. Like, just like this little, car just like hits him. The Africa one, like I said, I thought was really creative. The poetry one, it's all of these typical Sesame Street lessons, and it seemed like maybe it was this classroom, this little world that was created in this classroom that allowed them to really get a little bit creative with it, a little bit like come up with a new way to show these things. And it makes it, I think it is entertaining for adults and for kids. I think it hits that sweet spot where you're kind of like, the kid can laugh because the guy got knocked over, and the parents appreciate that someone is telling Smart Tina to think through all of it. It just, I don't know. I enjoyed what they did with these, even on the feelings ones. I thought the like, if you don't cry, people don't know you're hurt was a really interesting way.
Oh yeah, that is.
You really did hurt yourself, didn't you? Yeah, but why didn't you cry?
Cry? Man, I'm too cool to cry.
Well, yeah, I can dig that. But how is anybody gonna know that you really hurt? They're just gonna think that you're okay, and then they're just gonna laugh at you.
Well, can I go outside now?
Yeah, go ahead.
I was like, that is, it's almost telling people to cry, but also there is a very, especially for that time, a very like honest, like show your emotions and let people know how you really feel. In a classroom in which, like I said, everybody's trying to play it cool. And I think teasing each other is part of that, like trying to show they're cool and one up each other. And the idea of like, no, man, you got to cry because how are people going to know that you're actually hurt? And I was like, And then the other one where he was saying like, he's not going to know that he hurt your feelings. She's like, he's not going to know that he hurt my feelings. Like he wouldn't know that because he said something mean to me. And they're like, no, you got to tell him. I was like, that's a very interesting take. Like you really gotta be authentic and put yourself out there and tell people how you feel, but not in it wasn't done in such a kid-like way. It was done in a more, I think, nuanced way. So I appreciate that.
And I do think it's super interesting from a like gender dynamic standpoint that both the one where Suzetta was hurt by Hardhead Henry Harris and the one where Baby Breeze was hurt by, really all of the kids. It's not saying like it's something like girls need to communicate how they feel or boys need to communicate how they feel. It's like, no, that's something for everybody. We see it happen to Suzetta. We see it happen to Baby Breeze, and again, and like, I think it matters a lot that Baby Breeze is sort of framed as like the coolest kid in class, or at least he thinks he's the coolest kid in class. I mean, Roosevelt's the coolest kid in class, but Roosevelt's also the teacher, so who knows? But oh, and I should just say, Baby Breeze was voiced by Northern Calloway or David from Sesame Street. David from Sesame Street, I say, as if I'm not talking about Sesame. It is interesting, though, because, again, like, yeah, the Roosevelt Franklin kids are definitely, they come across as older than the rest of the Sesame Street Muppets. I know you said that it was almost like high school, but even if it's not like high school, like, they're definitely older than, like, Big Bird is.
Yes. Yeah, and they're responding in ways that are different. And also, I did appreciate when, Hard-Headed Harry found out he hurt someone's feelings. He's like, oh man, I didn't know that. I'm sorry. Like he, instead of being like, oh, she can take it, or like, yeah, whatever. He like also responded in not a almost not a childlike way. It just doesn't feel like they're approaching these kids as like the 3 to 5 age range. It seems as if they're aiming a little higher in some of these conversations.
Absolutely. I wanted to talk a little bit about schools and intelligence as well, because one thing that I thought was really interesting here was that, Smart Tina is a girl. We talk a lot about gender roles on this show. Is a girl and is framed as the smartest kid in class, even if she's not always right. She is definitely Smart Tina. She's the one that, if anything, the kids get tired of because she knows everything and is constantly telling them that she knows everything. So I wanted to do a little bit of research into, like, girls and schooling. Because anecdotally, I feel like I know Smart Tina so well. I'm a high school teacher in my regular job, and I feel like every year I have at least 3 Smart Tinas. And then maybe at least 1 or 2 boy Smart Tinas, Smart Tonys. I guess Chris is honestly the male form of Tina, Smart Chris. But because Tina is short for Christina, right? You're giving me a look. You're giving me a look like I'm speaking crazy talk here.
I always thought Tina was just Tina.
Anyway, Smart Tonys. And thanks to Tony Whitaker for helping with the research on this episode, and like every episode, being a real smart Tony over there. But it was interesting. You know, I was looking at a study from the University of Illinois that was reported on the website Global Citizen, but it's previously from the University of Illinois, that basically said that girls tend to not think that they are as smart as boys. Girls as young as 6, when they're told to think about, like, what is a smart person or a smart student look like, tend to think about boys, not girls. But it's also interesting, and this was reported in 2017, but also interesting was a study from 2014 I found doing some research, and that's a little older than I like to use for my research. It's 11 years old, but that found that, at least in 2014, girls tended to do better in schools. Like, girls tended to do better in school than boys did, but girls also didn't conceptualize themselves as smart. And the same could be said for how boys conceptualized girls. So I think it's super important that Smart Tina is a girl. Although I guess really the smartest one in the class is Roosevelt, right? Like,
right.
But that's important too. And especially, you know, again, that Roosevelt is black and is portrayed as being very smart really matters for beating, you know, certain stereotypes in society that I'm not as much of an expert in. What's your take on this as a parent, Drake?
I mean, you know, it's interesting. It tracks that, like, girls don't think there's... I mean, society is built up to portray men as the powerful ones and the smart ones, and, you know, mansplaining comes from that. Any meeting you've ever been in where you got shushed, or where someone talked over you or said your idea 2 minutes later and claimed it was their own and everyone just forgot that you just said it. Things like that, where I think...
You know, would you believe that happens to me more? It happens to me, you know, starting in like 2021, it started happening to me more. And it's like, what changed? Could it possibly be that people now read me as a woman, whereas they didn't prior to 2021? I don't know. Anyway, Drake, you were saying.
Just shocking that anyone perceived as a woman is going to get talked over. I mean, it is just how it works. And so I think that is what girls are picking up on, even though, of course, you know, I don't think boys or girls are necessarily smarter as, you know, a gender. I just think there's smarter ones in both of them. I will say my daughter seems to not have picked up on that whatsoever. I mean, I remember the day she realized that doctors could be guys. She just didn't realize. She thought they were all women. And she actually said, men can be doctors? And
Your
daughter,
like, raised on Themyscira with Wonder Woman here, I guess.
Every doctor she'd ever had was a woman. Every doctor she'd ever seen was a woman, and people we know who are doctors are women. So she did not know any male doctors and just thought that that was interesting, that a guy could be a doctor. And I think in other ways, too, when I've brought up this conversation, you know, I happen to work in the human rights field, and so sometimes conversations will come up about a place like Afghanistan and the idea that, you know, women are not allowed to go to school there, and, you know, how does she feel about that, or what would she think of that? And she, you know, and a lot of questions about why would that be? And the idea that, well, women are, you know, men are perceived as smarter or whatever. She's like continually shocked by that idea. So I don't feel necessarily that it's as strong as it used to be, or maybe not strong in the where we live, or, you know, in the way that we're raising her. She's also an only child, you know, so she, for all she knows, she's the center of the universe. But I do think that certainly it is not surprising to me at all that there's any study. It could have come out yesterday. It could have come out 50 years ago. I feel like our society hasn't really changed that much, although maybe my daughter gives me hope that it is, and that there is no girls are smarter than boys or boys are smarter than girls at all. It's just you're all kids and you all should have capacity to learn. And I think newer studies coming out, and I don't know how far we want to get into this, but are showing that with the way schools are being set up, in which kindergarten now has kids doing much more learning and less play. And the play-based caters more to how boys learn. And up until a certain age, having things more play-based at younger years really helped the boys sort of cater to how they learn better, and then clicked over when, as kids got older and sat in desks and stuff. Girls are, in general, it's easier for them to sit still earlier and kind of focus earlier than it is for boys. And so now it is catering, and it is creating a gender gap that is less good for boys. And so maybe that whole impression is going to change over time, but I don't think that is a good way to go about it. I think we should have learning that caters to all children, and ideally more play-based in general.
So much of this also just as a trans woman who's very involved in trans and gender related advocacy work when I'm not at my actual job or at my second actual job, which is podcasting about Rodeo Rosie, the Sesame Street cowgirl. I do a lot of work with that. And there's a lot that I wonder too about where these kind of gender differences come from, because frankly, I don't think a lot of the data is there for it being something that is biological in nature. I think a lot of it comes from society and culture and things like that. But it's something that unfortunately there isn't a lot of studies on, again, because it's sort of difficult to find a sample size for that. And now we're getting really away from Smart Tina. I've met your daughter, and I say this with a lot of love. Your daughter has some Smart Tina energy,
She's got Smart Tina energy. She has something to say.
She really does. She really does. She
doesn't mind asking a question. She doesn't mind voicing an opinion. Yep.
Any other thoughts on these two characters or any of the rest of Roosevelt Franklin's squad before we move to our other little silo?
Oh man, can we stay in Roosevelt? I don't necessarily have anything to say. I'm just not so eager to go to the Total Bugs, but you know what? I would I think I'll look up more clips actually. I enjoyed these, and I appreciate the debate. And the controversy around them. I'm curious to know more about that, but just as an interesting learning tool and a different voice and way of showing voice for kids on the show, because it's limited. Sometimes the characters, how recurring kids are portrayed, and I liked having this sort of range of voices that this classroom brought. Or a different vibe, I guess. It's a different vibe more than voices. But
a couple of things, actually. So we don't have to move to our next silo just yet, because I realized I had two more things that I wanted to discuss in our notes. And one of them was I sent you some scans of picture books. There's not a ton to say about picture books. Suzetta Something has never appeared in a picture book. And Smart Tina appeared mostly in the year 1975 and then stopped. And just to get a sense of how little it seems like the Sesame Street team cared about keeping consistency there, she is called Sweet Tina in the only book that gives her a name. So Sweet Tina, I'm saying it like that to indicate that it's all one word and there's only one T, so it is Sweet Tina.
Oh, like a Sweetums, but a Sweet Tina. Oh,
yeah.
Very sweet.
Exactly. And the second thing I wanted to just point out for folks at home is there's one other place. You know how I said that they don't really interact with the main Muppet cast, but there's one place where they do, besides the headball sketches where they don't actually interact with the cast. The cast just sits in the stands and watches them play headball. Headball is Roosevelt Franklin's signature sport, where you have to answer basic, what should you do if your ball rolls into the street? And that's how you score goals in headball.
Wow, that is way better than I pictured. Someone's disembodied head being.
No. You got to use your.
I'm actually very, very glad you clarified for them.
And they actually,
it's like, wow, they went real far on getting away from the Sesame Street vibe.
They used to. I mean, there was always an establishing shot of where the Mets played. What was it before it was Citi Field? It was the Mets.
I do know the Mets.
What was the name of their old stadium? Okay, well, so lots to say about Headball, but the really only place where the characters actually interacted with the main Muppet gang was on the Merry Christmas from Sesame Street album. Both Smart Tina and Hardhead Henry Harris have verses in the original 1975 version of the 12 Days of Christmas. Bizarrely, Loretta Long voices Smart Tina on that, so she's just Suzetta something, but referred to as Smart Tina.
On the 10th day of Christmas, my true love sent to me 10 wind-up rabbits, 9 pounds of birdseed.
And Roscoe Orman is Hardhead Henry Harris there, so we do know that. And then when that album was re-released in 1994, they dubbed over them with Elmo and Telly.
Oh, okay. Does Elmo say, what is it, the line? That's a jive gift to give or something?
No, Elmo does not say what a jive gift. I guess you have heard this particular album because you seem to know exactly the what a jive gift.
It's just such a unique line, and also because I didn't know Hard-Headed Harry, I was like, who's that guy?
Right, exactly. Because how would you know?
That's not Harry Monster.
No. But they are cited on the back of the album as being those two characters. That is the only album where those characters appear. That's it. There's not much to say about them. So the Twiddlebugs. Drake, you weren't really familiar with the Twiddlebugs. Let's start with the good things about the Twiddlebugs. I
love their name.
Okay, you love their name. You
love their name. Adorable. And what about that little carton? That's cute.
What I was about to say is I want to build a little terrarium where I put a model of the Twiddlebugs cottage. I wanna try to make a carton, get an empty milk carton, wash it out, get some burnt matches and a string to tie between two nails and old pencils to use as shingles. And a little matchbox to use as a car, and put it in a little fake terrarium that I can keep here in my office with all my other Muppet stuff around me. That
as long as they don't speak.
Well, that's a great thing that you're getting to. The thing about the Twiddlebugs is the Twiddlebugs appeared a lot in Sesame Street stuff, in the sense that, like, if you pick up a lot of Sesame Street books, the artists will have drawn little Twiddlebugs, in the background. And now that you know them, you're going to see them in stuff. They're in a lot of things. Even this poster behind me, you can vaguely see there's a green Twiddlebug between Snuffy and Grover over there. It's a little hard to see on Zoom, and those of you at home can't see it at all. But the Twiddlebug family, who we meet in, let me get the year of their debut, who we meet in 1974. That's right, same year. That Twiddlebug family has only appeared once in book form, and it was one coloring book. There has never been a book about that family in particular. In fact, I was confident there was. I was like, I grew up with a book that had Tina Twiddlebug in it, and I was all ready to talk about Tina Twiddlebug in the book. Unfortunately, that book does exist. It's called When Oscar Was a Baby Grouch, or When Oscar Was a Little Grouch. The problem is that character Tina Twiddlebug is a different character with no relation to this Tina Twiddlebug, making there be 3 Tinas, 2 of which are named Tina Twiddlebug, but are completely different characters. It's a great name. It is. The problem with the Twiddlebugs is they talk.
Guess what Daddy has brought home?
What have you brought home, Daddy?
A new postage stamp picture to hang on our wall.
I just love to hang postage stamp pictures on the wall.
Good.
Oh, It is. And they don't, I mean, they talk and they say nothing or ridiculousness.
Why don't you describe these sketches a little bit for the folks at home, Drake?
My hope, and I know this is terrible, was that like a big old foot would come down and kind of smash the Twiddlebug. Sorry. They are adorable. Their name is cute. Their house, I mean, they have buttons for the wheels on the car. But like, so they seem to be, trying to show a lesson by like being total idiots. But I just feel like it's done so much better in so many other ways on Sesame Street that I don't get why this needs to happen. I mean, the Yip Yips, they are someone who don't understand things, but they are creative and interesting, and I could watch them all day. There was that duo, Grover, Mr. Noodle. And
yeah, which obviously Mr. Noodle didn't exist at this point in 1974.
No. But those two guys from the Buddy and Jim. Is that like duo who couldn't hang a painting or whatever? I mean,
and Larry and Phyllis was the other duo.
Yeah, so I mean, there are ways to do this that is creative and makes you feel smart. I felt dumber after watching it. I did not feel smarter. And I have to say, my least favorite was the fire alarm, because the only thing more annoying than a fire alarm sound going off is a Twiddlebug talking over a fire alarm.
So you might have noticed on the notes that I sent you, I did write down, great, now I have to hear them and a smoke alarm.
It has to be the worst audio moment.
Interesting fact. So obviously the Twiddlebug's voices are sped up, right? I should say Tessie Twiddlebug is the mother. She is performed by Frank Oz. And Tina Twiddlebug is the daughter. She is performed by Jerry Nelson. And then there is also Thomas Twiddlebug, who is performed by Jim Henson. And Timmy Twiddlebug, who is performed by Richard Hunt. Although there's a couple differences, some of the sketches, Tina and Timmy are switched. Some of the sketches, I'm not going to get into it. It's not important. You can look it up on Muppet Wiki. Enjoy. Although I still need to add an article on the other Tina Twiddlebug, although it'll probably be there by the time this episode is out. Anyway, these were sped up in post. As you can probably guess. What would happen is the performers would speak as slowly as possible when recording, and then the sketches would be sped up. According to Muppet Wiki, the reason the Twiddlebugs have this very deliberate enunciation and like speak so deliberately, like in complete sentences, like, "Why, yes, my darling daughter, we need to flip the stamp around," is because that was the only way the dialogue could be understood when it was sped up. Now, I bring this up, Drake, because in the smoke detector sketch you talked about, that was the only time they tried speeding up the voices live on set using voice modulating equipment. And you can tell that the Twiddlebug's voices are even more annoying in that sketch.
You know what? I have to say, the other really not disgusting, but terrible audio moment, and when it was disgusting, is the licking of that stamp. Like the whole family. Ew. Ew. I don't know that I noticed. I think I was perpetually annoyed by them. I don't know that I noticed that the sound was much different in the smoke detector one. I just found it equally as frustrating. And I also just had a sense of like, who is this for exactly? It's definitely not for me. But I don't know even that I think it would maybe be fairly innocuous to a kid, but I don't really feel like they're going to embrace it.
I remember loving the Twiddlebugs as a kid. It is worth noting that
then it's for Becca as a child.
Most of what I loved was their appearances in books and stuff, though. Again, because
where they weren't speaking.
That's what I remember. The only sketch I remember was the postage stamp one. And it's worth noting that these sketches were pretty few and far between. Literally the first one, 1974, the second one, 1975, and then the third one, and I didn't send you all of them, thank goodness, but the third one wasn't until 1980. So literally it was like one in 1974, one in 1975, one in 1980. So I should say for those folks listening along at home, usually I've been capping things at like 1979 this season, but for the sake of having things to talk about with the Twiddlebugs, we went all the way up to the smoke detector one was 1987. So not too long before Jim Henson passes, like we're getting real close to sort of the end of the classic era of the Muppets. The place where I called it off for this was when the Twiddlebugs are replaced with the animated Twiddlebugs. Because, Drake, these characters kept appearing. In season 37, which would have started in 2005, in season 37, they introduced CGI animated Twiddlebugs, who appeared in a number of sketches. There were 5 CGI animated Twiddlebug sketches that you can enjoy.
Oh, and I will, Becca. I will. I would say my recommended viewing would be one Twiddlebug sketch every 2 to 3 to 5 years. I think that feels on track for what I would recommend.
My recommended viewing is the book The Twiddlebugs Dream House, which you can access on the Internet Archive, which is a wonderful book, picture book with photos of a miniature house and clay like models of the Twiddlebugs. It's super cute. It's one of my favorites. It is adorable, but again, it does not feature these Twiddlebugs. Now, I wanted to talk about the Twiddlebugs when I scheduled this episode. I wanted to talk about the Twiddlebugs as individuals, and in my memory, I was like, well, Tina Twiddlebug's the smart Twiddlebug, because I remembered the stamp one where Thomas goes,
"My daughter, the super brain."
But Tina isn't the smart one.
It's gonna be hard pressed to find a smart one, Becca.
I don't feel like I can identify a difference between the Twiddlebugs. I'm not even certain a lot of the time who's talking.
It doesn't matter.
And I've been in this Muppet game for a long time, folks. I would not have known that Tina Twiddlebug was Jerry Nelson.
I don't really think they made much. I mean, a slight attempt to make them a little bit different, but I don't think it mattered for the storylines, certainly, if you can call them that. And I don't think it mattered.
I don't think it matters.
I don't think they cared as any more than we do, actually. Except whoever built them, whoever created that set, they cared, and I appreciate them. But yeah, no.
And I like the idea in theory. Kids absolutely love playing with scale like that. Like,
yes.
What if
and little things.
Little things, and Ernie is big compared. Like, I used to love stuff like that. You had like the Littles and the Borrowers and the Secret World of Arietti and all of these things. And it's definitely playing around in that toolbox. And that's why I'm like, the best place to look for the Twiddlebugs is in books. But you are not going to see Thomas and Timmy and Tina and Tessie in books. But you will see cute small things in books. And I like that.
Yeah, and you don't have to hear them.
You don't
make your own voice, and whatever you make will be better.
Hey, it's me, the Twiddlebug. Yeah, this is how I talk. How's it going?
That would be an amazing Twiddlebug. Especially if it's like the little, especially if it's Tina.
Yeah, exactly. The only other thing that I want to say about Twiddlebugs, unless you've got something to say, is in their first 2 appearances, the Twiddlebugs were not small. I did not send you their first appearances. They first appeared in 2 sketches from 1971, where they were just regular anything Muppet size. An interesting fact, they first debut in the same sketch that introduced Prairie Dawn herself.
Oh, well, that would have been a better sketch to watch.
Yeah, but it's not the Twiddlebug family. They're different. Like, again, it's not Tina and Tessie. And I really wanted to talk. When I wrote these notes, I was like, well, I gotta talk about Tina and Tessie. Drake, do you have any last thoughts on Tina and Tessie? What do you think they're doing now?
Oof. The lifespan of a Twiddlebug, and I don't want to wreck this for you.
Oh, no. No!
It's probably not, especially these ones, because they just can't even hang a stamp. So, or are trying to hang a stamp, which makes no sense either. So,
maybe George Washington liked to stand on his head, Drake. Maybe George Washington liked to stand on his head.
I actually hear this. I hear this a lot. And I had never had proof to the Twiddlebugs. I have to say, actually, I think my favorite part of the Twiddlebugs is Ernie. He just cares about them so much, and his little eye looks very cute in the window.
You get a different sense of Ernie from them, and I like that. I like Ernie. It's a more gentle Ernie, and
it's
I
like Junior Gorg and his radish.
Yes, it's
just
very
like this
Junior
caring like person coming out to take care of these little Twiddlebugs and hopes he doesn't hurt them and hopes they're doing okay. And I love Ernie's vision for the Twiddlebugs more than I love the reality of the Twiddlebugs.
But sadly, this is not an Ernie podcast.
No, sadly.
Drake, I think we've made it clear why the Twiddlebugs didn't stick around or become main characters or anything like that. And, unfortunately, while I'd love to do more research into the exact situation that led to Tina and Suzetta not sticking around, it seems like there were things sort of bigger than the show itself. So I feel like for this episode, why we don't see much of these characters anymore, it's kind of self-apparent. Drake, where can people find you if you want to be found?
I have some articles on ToughPigs, so I hope that people will read those. And I hang out in the Discord sometimes as well.
Yeah. It's always great. Thank you so much. I'm sorry you couldn't talk about better characters. Maybe next season I'll have you back on to talk about characters who you like.
Would love to be back anytime. And I did like Roosevelt, the Franklin Roosevelt.
That's true. You did. Truly, the tales of Roosevelt's friends and the Twiddlebugs are some of the strangest stories we've seen so far. Never meant to be main characters, Smart Tina was written off the show for being too controversial. Tina Twiddlebug stuck around until very recently, but with sparse appearances and no transmedia footprint. But around the same time, Sesame introduced a character whose legacy was even stranger. A character who appeared on the show fewer than 10 times, including in sketches recycled for future episodes. A character who never once appeared on an album, but who had a featured role in the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. And a character who stuck around in picture books through 1992.
Wahoo! Howdy, partners! Oh my God. Rodeo Rose is my name, and being a cowgirl's my game.
Next week on A Prairie Dawn Companion, saddle up for the Ballad of Rodeo Rosie. I'll be seeing y'all at the Hootenanny.
I really am quite remarkable.
A Prairie Dawn Companion is a production of ToughPigs.com. It is written, produced, edited, and hosted by Becca Petunia, and executive produced by the ToughPigs Muppet Fan Podcast executive producer, Joe Hennes. Thanks to Scott Hanson, Shane Keating, Tony Whitaker, and the whole Muppet Wiki team for helping me with research. The book Street Gang by Michael Davis was also indispensable. Thanks to Katilyn Miller, Michal Richardson, and Eli Lee for help with script revisions. Follow ToughPigs on social media. You can support us on Patreon or by buying a t-shirt on our TeePublic. Join the conversation on the ToughPigs Discord. You can support A Prairie Dawn Companion and lots of other podcasts too by giving Muppet Fan Podcasts with ToughPigs.com 5 stars on your podcast reviewing app of choice.
Come on, everybody. Help me lick the stamp. Yes! There we go.
This stamp isn't too yummy.
Keep licking.
Come on, children.